I gave everything to the man I loved. My youth, my loyalty, my body. I even worked 3 jobs just so he could be successful. And the only way he thought he could repay me was leaving our 4-year-old daughter alone to go see another woman. That night, my little girl died, and the woman I was died with her. Now I am nothing like the woman he left behind, and this is how I took everything back. The phone vibrated first on the kitchen counter, not loudly, not urgently, just enough to be noticed. Mara Call stood over the stove, stirring oatmeal that had already gone too thick. She stared at it like the oatmeal had personally disappointed her, again. She sighed, added a little water, and told herself it was fine. Everything didn't have to be perfect. The phone buzzed a second time. She reached for it without looking, and that's when it slipped. The phone slid off the counter, spun once, and landed face up on the tile. The sound wasn't dramatic, just dull, ordinary. Mara didn't move. The microwave beeped behind her. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car drove past, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Somewhere, someone laughed. Life continued. On the phone screen, a message glowed quietly. Daniel is at the hospital. The baby is coming. Mara stared at the words, waiting for them to rearrange themselves into something else. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe this is just another spam message that didn't belong in my life but made sense. They didn't. Her throat tightened, like her body had suddenly forgotten how swallowing worked. She bent down slowly, picked up the phone, and read it again. Then again, slower this time. Baby. Her knees felt weak, but she didn't sit. She leaned against the counter instead, pressing her palm into the cold surface as if it could hold her upright. Daniel didn't have a baby. They didn't have a baby. At least, not together. And that was when the memory came back. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like her mind was flipping through old footage she had sworn she'd archived. Mara Cole had loved Daniel Cross when she was 21 years old. Loved him in the reckless way only young women do. The kind of love that believes that sacrifice is a proof of devotion, that pain was temporary, and loyalty would someday be rewarded. She believed that love was something you earned by trying harder. Daniel wasn't rich when she met him. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't even stable, but he was brilliant. They met in a tiny coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. Daniel talked too much, knocked over his cup, apologized like it mattered. His ideas spilled out faster than his words could keep up. He talked about the future like it was already waiting for him, like it was already his to conquer. Mara listened. She believed him even when no one else did. She liked the way his eyes lit up when he talked about things that didn't exist yet. She liked believing in someone who believed in something. It made her feel useful, necessary, chosen. Back then, Daniel didn't have much. No money, no connections, just ideas and a confidence that felt borrowed but convincing. Mara had more than he did. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to help, enough to support, enough to carry them when he couldn't. She didn't know that carrying someone for too long teaches them how to let go. Their first apartment barely deserved the name. The paint peeled in the bathroom, the window stuck halfway open. The couch made a noise every time you sat down, like it was complaining. Mara worked mornings at a cafe. afternoons at a retail store where the music never matched the season, and nights doing freelance typing jobs, hunched over a small desk squeezed between the bed and the wall. 3 jobs. Daniel worked from home, which mostly meant pacing, whiteboards, sticky notes, coffee cups everywhere except the sink. "This one's it," he would say, gesturing wildly at his laptop. "Just give me a little more time." Mara nodded. She always nodded. Sometimes she came home so tired she forgot to take off her shoes. Sometimes she cried in the shower because it was the only place she could do it without explaining herself. She told herself this was love. Once the electricity got cut off again. Daniel lit candles and said, "Honestly, this is kind of romantic." Mara ate cereal in the dark and laughed. Romantic poverty. They laughed together. She laughed longer. Years passed like that, quietly, unevenly. Mara stopped updating her resume, stopped talking about going back to school, stopped asking herself what she wanted. Rocks don't ask questions when people lean on them. They just hold. When Daniel's startup finally succeeded, it didn't arrive gently. It burst into their lives with meetings and flights and words like valuation and investors. Daniel started wearing suits, started checking his phone more than he checked in with her. Mara told herself this was normal. Success changes people, she thought. It doesn't replace them. But little things shifted. Daniel came home later, took calls in the hallway, smelled different sometimes. Not perfume exactly, just unfamiliar. When Mara talked, he listened like someone waiting for their turn to leave. She noticed. She said nothing. Then there was Vanessa. Daniel hadn't spoken her name in years, but when Mara heard it for the first time, it landed strangely in her chest. Vanessa Hale, the woman from college, the one who left when Daniel's family lost everything. When money disappeared, so did she. At least, that was the story Daniel told. Mara believed it. Belief was her strongest habit. The truth revealed itself on a quiet afternoon when Mara wasn't looking for it. Daniel had left his laptop open on the dining table. It hummed softly. A notification popped up. "We need to talk. I'm pregnant." Mara froze. Her hand hovered over the trackpad. She told herself not to touch it, told herself this was none of her business. She clicked. Messages filled the screen. Long threads, familiar jokes, hotel bookings disguised as business trips, photos that didn't leave room for doubt. The betrayal wasn't dramatic. It was organized, efficient, personal. Mara slid down the cabinet until she was sitting on the kitchen floor, her back pressed into the wood, her knees pulled to her chest. Her breathing came shallow, uneven. She laughed. A small, broken sound. "Of course," she whispered. "Of course." When Daniel came home, she didn't scream, she didn't cry. She asked. He didn't deny it. "It didn't mean anything," he said, rubbing his temples like he had a headache. "She's pregnant," Mara replied. Silence. "It happened once. I was confused." Confused. Such a small word. Mara wanted to leave. She imagined packing a bag, imagined dignity, imagined herself choosing herself for once. Instead, she stayed, because love makes intelligent people foolish. Daniel promised it was over. She believed him. Again. A year later, Lily was born. Small, loud, perfect. When Mara held her daughter, something settled inside her. Lily's tiny fingers wrapped around hers like an anchor. If Daniel had cracked her, Lily repaired her. Mara smiled more, slept less, loved harder. She told herself that whatever happened between adults, this child would never feel unsafe. But Daniel drifted again. Calls taken outside, trips that lasted too long, missed bedtimes. Once, Mara caught his reflection in the mirror, guilt flickering across his face like a warning light. She ignored it. Ignoring pain had become routine. And now she stood in the kitchen, staring at a phone that told her everything she'd tried not to know. Daniel is at the hospital. The baby is coming. Mara looked down the hallway toward Lily's room. The door was slightly open. A nightlight cast a soft glow onto the floor. Her chest tightened. Downstairs, a car door slammed. Daniel was already gone. And somewhere deep inside her, something whispered that this moment, was not just another disappointment. It was the beginning of something breaking. Mara didn't call Daniel right away. That surprised even her. She stood in the kitchen long after the message had burned itself into her memory, phone resting in her palm like it had grown there. She listened to the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock on the wall, the faint sound of Lily's breathing down the hall. She told herself there was an explanation. There was always an explanation. Daniel liked explanations. He used them the way other people used apologies. She set the phone down, turned off the stove, and walked toward Lily's room. The hallway light flickered the way it always did. Mara made a mental note to change the bulb. She'd been making that same note for weeks. Lily was asleep, curled on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek. Her hair stuck up in strange directions, defying gravity and logic. Mara smiled despite herself. "Just like your father," she whispered. She brushed a strand of hair away from her forehead and stood there a moment longer than necessary. Something tugged at her chest, a quiet, uncomfortable feeling she couldn't name. She ignored it. Mara had gotten very good at ignoring things. Back in the living room, she picked up her phone again. No new messages, no missed calls. She texted Daniel, "Are you okay?" The message showed as delivered, not read. She waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. She told herself he was busy. Hospitals were chaotic. Babies didn't arrive on schedules. She sat on the couch and turned on the television, though she didn't really watch it. The volume stayed low, just enough to fill the silence. A sitcom laugh track played, bright and fake, completely disconnected from the way her chest felt. Another 10 minutes passed. Mara texted again. "When will you be home?" Still nothing. Her phone buzzed suddenly, and her heart jumped, but it was only a calendar reminder. Pay daycare balance. She exhaled slowly. Daniel had promised to handle that this month. She turned the TV off. The apartment felt larger without sound. The walls seemed farther apart. The clock grew louder. Midnight came and went. Mara paced once, then twice. She stopped herself before it became a habit. Pacing felt like panic, and panic felt like admitting something was wrong. She checked Lily again, still asleep. The nightlight cast the same soft glow. The door remained slightly open, exactly as she'd left it. Back in the living room, Mara picked up Daniel's jacket from the chair. It still smelled like his cologne. She held it for a moment longer than she meant to, then dropped it back like it had burned her. At 1:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped again. This time it was Daniel. "I'll be back soon." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just soon. Mara stared at the word like it was written in a foreign language. Soon had become Daniel's favorite word. Soon meant hours. Soon meant days. Soon meant never asking follow-up questions. She didn't reply. She went to bed instead. Sleep didn't come easily. Every small sound pulled her awake. The building settling, a car horn outside, the faint buzz of her phone that turned out to be nothing at all. At some point, exhaustion won. Morning light crept in through the curtains. Mara woke with a dull ache behind her eyes and the strange feeling that something had already gone wrong. She checked her phone. No new messages. Daniel hadn't come home. She sat up slowly, listening. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. "Daniel?" she called softly, knowing the answer. Nothing. Mara swung her legs off the bed and walked down the hallway. Lily's door was open wider than before. Mara frowned. She stepped inside. The bed was empty. The blankets were pushed aside, tangled in a way that suggested movement. Lily's favorite stuffed bear lay on the floor near the door. Mara's heart stuttered. "Lily?" she called, louder now. No answer. She checked the bathroom. Empty. The living room. Empty. Her chest tightened. She moved faster, panic finally catching up to her. "Lily?" she shouted. Still nothing. Mara's eyes landed on the front door. Unlocked. Her stomach dropped. She ran back to Lily's room, her hands shaking as she grabbed her phone. She called Daniel. Straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Her breathing grew shallow, her thoughts scattered. Where would Lily go? She couldn't unlock the door by herself. She couldn't reach the stove. She couldn't... The memory hit her at once. Daniel's jacket. Gone. Mara froze. She stood in the middle of the hallway, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Daniel had left, and he had taken Lily with him. Relief flooded her so suddenly her knees weakened. Of course he took her. Why wouldn't he? She laughed shakily, wiping tears she hadn't realized had formed. "Idiot," she whispered to herself. She sat on the couch and waited. Minutes passed, then more. Her phone stayed silent. She checked the time. 11:43 a.m. Daycare would have called by now if Lily hadn't shown up. Unless... Mara stood again, dread crawling back into her chest. She called daycare. The woman on the other end sounded confused. Lily was picked up early yesterday. By her father. Mara's mouth dried. What time? Just before closing. Mara's grip tightened on the phone. So Daniel had Lily last night. He had her, and he hadn't brought her home. Mara hung up and dialed Daniel again. This time the phone rang longer, then stopped, then rang again. Finally, he answered. "What?" Daniel said, irritation heavy in his voice. "Where is Lily?" Mara demanded. Silence. "Daniel," she said, her voice cracking, "where is my daughter?" I stepped out for a bit. She was asleep." Something cold spread through Mara's chest. "You left her alone?" she whispered. "She was fine," Daniel snapped. "I wasn't gone long." The world seemed to tilt. "Where did you go?" Mara asked. Another pause. "Vanessa needed me," he said. The words landed like a slap. "How long were you gone?" Mara asked. Daniel didn't answer. Mara felt her heart climb into her throat. "Daniel," she said slowly, "go back. Go back right now." The line went dead. Mara didn't scream. She grabbed her keys and ran. The drive felt unreal. Traffic lights blurred. Horns sounded distant. Her hands shook so badly she had to grip the steering wheel with both hands. When she reached the apartment building, there were already people outside. An ambulance, police, red and blue lights flashing against the walls. Mara stumbled out of her car. Someone tried to stop her. She pushed past. "Lily!" she screamed. The words tore out of her throat. A paramedic caught her before she fell. "I'm sorry," he said gently. She didn't hear the rest. The world narrowed to one unbearable truth. Daniel had left their 4-year-old daughter alone, and Lily had died. Mara buried her child 3 days later. The sky was gray. The air was heavy. The world felt wrong. People spoke to her, but their words slid past like water. Daniel stood across the cemetery, his face hollow, his hands shaking. Mara didn't look at him. She couldn't. As the small casket was lowered into the ground, something inside her shut down. Not broke, shut down. When it was over, she went home alone. She sat on Lily's bed and stared at the empty space where her daughter should have been. The nightlight still glowed. Mara reached over and turned it off. Darkness filled the room, and in that darkness, the woman she had been finally disappeared. The house stayed quiet after the funeral. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind of silence that feels unfinished, like someone paused the world and forgot to press play again. Mara Cole returned home alone. Daniel didn't follow her. He stood at the cemetery for a long time after everyone else left, staring at the patch of earth that now held their daughter. Mara didn't wait to see how long. She drove back without remembering the drive. Inside the apartment, everything looked exactly the same. The couch, the walls, the clock ticking steadily, like it hadn't noticed anything had changed. Lily's shoes still sat by the door. Mara bent down and picked one up. It was lighter than she remembered. She turned it over in her hands, brushed off a speck of dirt that wasn't there, then set it back exactly where it had been. She didn't cry. Not yet. She walked into Lily's room and stood in the doorway for a long time. The bed was made. Too neat. Someone had tried to be helpful. The nightlight was off. Mara reached out and turned it on again. The soft glow filled the room, landing on the walls, the floor, the empty bed. Her knees gave out. She sat on the floor with her back against Lily's bed and stared straight ahead. Her body felt heavy, like gravity had suddenly doubled. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look at it. It buzzed again, then again. Eventually, the sound stopped. The world learned how to live without her participation. Days passed, or maybe hours. Time stopped making sense. People came by at first. Family, friends. Some brought food, some brought words they clearly didn't believe themselves. She's in a better place. She wouldn't want you to be sad. God has a plan. Mara nodded politely. She wanted to ask which part of the plan involved a 4-year-old dying alone in the dark, but she said nothing. Daniel didn't come back to the apartment. He texted once. "I'm sorry." That was it. Mara stared at the message until the words lost meaning. Sorry didn't bring Lily back. Sorry didn't rewind time. Sorry didn't undo the choice he made. She didn't reply. Weeks passed. Mara returned to work because people eventually expect you to function again. She stood behind counters, answered emails, smiled when required. At night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep came in short, broken pieces. When she dreamed, Lily was always just out of reach, close enough to see, too far to touch. Sometimes Mara woke up reaching for her. The apartment felt wrong now, too big, too quiet, like it was waiting for a sound that would never come back. She stopped cooking, stopped turning on the TV, stopped caring if the hallway light flickered. One afternoon, Mara received a call from the police. They wanted to ask more questions. She agreed without hesitation. The station smelled like coffee and old paper. A detective with tired eyes sat across from her, hands folded. "Daniel says he was only gone for an hour," the detective said carefully. Mara didn't react. "He says Lily was asleep when he left." Still nothing. "Did you know he planned to leave her alone that night?" Mara looked up. "No," she said. The detective nodded slowly. "Did he do that often?" "No," she said again. Then, after a pause, "Not that I know of." The detective scribbled something down. "Where did he go?" Mara asked. The detective hesitated. "Do you want me to answer that?" Mara met his gaze. "Yes." He exhaled. "He went to see Vanessa Hale." The name landed differently now, not like betrayal, like confirmation. Mara nodded once. The interview ended shortly after that. Outside, the sun felt too bright, too normal. Daniel wasn't arrested. Negligence was complicated. Accidents were messy. Intention mattered. And Daniel insisted he never meant for anything to happen. Mara learned that intention didn't matter much to the dead. Daniel tried to see her after that. He showed up at the apartment one evening without warning. Mara heard the knock but didn't answer right away. She stood on the other side of the door, listening to his breathing. He knocked again. "Mara," he said softly. She opened the door. Daniel looked smaller, thinner. His eyes were red, his hair unkempt. He looked like someone who had lost something. Mara felt nothing. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said. She stared at him. "I loved her, you know that." Mara nodded slowly. "I know," she said. The calmness in her voice unsettled him. "I was only gone for a little while," Daniel said. "I thought—" "You thought about yourself," Mara interrupted. Daniel flinched. "I made a mistake," he said desperately. Mara smiled. "It wasn't warm. You made a choice, and Lily paid for it." Daniel started crying. Mara watched him the way you watch a stranger cry on public transportation, awkward, distant, slightly uncomfortable. When he reached for her, she stepped back. "Get your things," she said. "What?" "You don't live here anymore." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He looked around the apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. He gathered his things quietly. When he left, Mara locked the door behind him. She slid down against it and sat there for a long time. Still no tears. They came later, much later. The first time Mara cried properly was 3 months after Lily's death. It happened in a grocery store. She reached for Lily's favorite cereal by habit. Her hand froze mid-air. She stood there staring at the box, and something inside her finally gave way. She sank to the floor between aisles and sobbed. A stranger tried to help. Mara waved them away. Grief arrived late, but when it came with teeth. She cried in her car, in the shower, in the middle of the night with her face buried in Lily's pillow. And then, slowly, something else crept in. Anger. At first, it was small, easy to ignore. Then it grew. She replayed that night over and over. The unlocked door, the empty bed, Daniel's voice on the phone. I wasn't gone long. Long enough. She started reading. Court cases, negligence laws, corporate ethics. At first, it felt pointless. Then it didn't. Daniel's startup continued to grow. Interviews, awards, articles calling him visionary. Mara read them all. She noticed patterns, mistakes hidden, truths polished, stories carefully edited. She realized something important. Daniel hadn't changed. He'd always been this way. She just hadn't wanted to see it. One evening, Mara stood in Lily's room holding a small pink shoe. She didn't cry. She felt clear. I won't let him win, she said out loud. The words didn't shake. They settled. That night, Mara slept through until morning for the first time in months. When she woke, she made coffee, ate breakfast, opened her laptop. She didn't know exactly what she was going to do yet, but she knew one thing. She wasn't the woman Daniel had left behind, and whatever came next wouldn't be accidental. Mara didn't rush. That surprised people later, when everything finally came apart. They expected anger to be loud, revenge to be fast, grief to turn reckless. But Mara had learned something in the months after Lily's death. Rushing was how Daniel lived. Patience was how she survived. She started small, too small for anyone to notice. She updated her resume for the first time in years, took a job that paid less than Daniel's world but more than enough to keep her steady. She learned how to sit in meetings again, how to speak without apologizing, how to listen without absorbing everything like a sponge. At night, she read. Not novels, not self-help, articles, court filings, corporate exposés. Daniel's company came up more often than she expected. Always positive, always glowing, the kind of praise that felt rehearsed if you stared at it long enough. Mara stared. She noticed inconsistencies, numbers that didn't quite line up, quotes that sounded cleaner than real speech ever was. She didn't accuse. She collected. Daniel, meanwhile, unraveled quietly. He called sometimes, left messages that started with apologies and ended with explanations. He wanted forgiveness, but more than that, he wanted relief. Mara didn't give him either. She answered occasionally, calmly, briefly, like a professional obligation. It unsettled him. She could hear it in his voice. the way he searched for emotion and found none. One evening, Daniel said, "I don't think you understand how hard this has been for me." Mara paused. "I understand perfectly," she replied. "I just don't care anymore." That was the moment something shifted. Daniel had always relied on her care, on her willingness to hold things together while he broke them. Without it, he looked exposed. Vanessa didn't stay. She left again when the tragedy became public, when grief replaced glamour, when attention turned sharp. History repeated itself. Daniel told Mara this once, as if it mattered. She listened, said nothing, because some stories don't deserve commentary. The first real opening came by accident, or maybe nothing was accidental anymore. A former employee from Daniel's company reached out anonymously. A short message, careful words. "I think you should know something." Mara read it twice. Then she replied. They met in a quiet cafe far from the city center. The man looked nervous, kept glancing around like secrets were contagious. Daniel, it turned out, had cut corners, pressured people, buried problems instead of fixing them. Nothing dramatic on its own, but patterns matter. Mara didn't promise anything. She just listened. Over time, others came forward, not because she asked, but because she made it safe to speak. She didn't dramatize, didn't threaten. She documented. When the information was complete, she didn't send it to the police. She sent it to a journalist, one with a reputation for patience. The article didn't come out immediately. Weeks passed. Daniel kept climbing. Conferences, interviews, smiles sharpened by confidence. Then, one morning, Mara woke up to her phone vibrating non-stop. The headline was everywhere. Questions replaced praise. Investigations followed. Investors paused, then withdrew. Daniel called her 6 times before she answered. When she did, he was frantic. "You did this," he said. Mara didn't deny it. "I told you I was sorry," he continued. "I've suffered too." Mara looked around Lily's room. The nightlight still sat on the dresser. She hadn't turned it on in a long time. "You lost a future," Mara said calmly. "I lost a child." Silence. "I didn't plan for any of this," Daniel whispered. Mara nodded. "I know," she said. "That's the problem." The investigation expanded. Regulators stepped in. The company collapsed slowly, painfully. Daniel's name became a cautionary tale instead of an inspiration. He was charged eventually, not for Lily's death, but for everything else. Negligence didn't put him in prison. Patterns did. Mara attended none of the hearings. She didn't need the spectacle. On the day Daniel was sentenced, she went to the park, Lily's park. The swings creaked softly in the breeze. Children laughed nearby. Parents called out warnings that went mostly ignored. Mara sat on a bench and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, the world didn't feel heavy. It felt quiet. Daniel wrote her a letter from prison. She read it once, then she burned it. Not out of anger, out of closure. Years later, people would ask how she did it, how she survived, how she stayed sane, how she took everything back. Mara never gave a clear answer, because the truth was simple and complicated at once. She didn't win. She finished. One evening, long after everything had settled, Mara stood in Lily's room and turned the nightlight on. The soft glow filled the space. She smiled, small, sad, real. "I remember you," she whispered, and for the first time since that night, the memory didn't hurt. It stayed, quiet, whole.